Saying Star Wars The Last Jedi is divisive is a huge understatement. Many fans love it and defend it, while others are trying to get it removed from the Star Wars official canon. But why? If you love the movie and have no idea why people are against it, please watch. Character progression is necessary in any film. Star Wars has seen some of the most beloved characters progress or regress depending on the trilogy. However, in this film, many of the character arcs just fall flat, or the characters just aren't that interesting. Poe starts this film by being a trigger-happy commander who leads a daring attempt against the First Order. The attack is successful but suffers from heavy casualties. While this is a great incident for Poe to learn from his actions, he just continues making similar mistakes throughout the film that kill thousands of fellow rebels. He continually disobeys the chain of command and goes as far as starting a mutiny. He goes from war hero to war criminal. It's very unrewarding. By the time he learns his lesson, the resistance is comprised of a handful of soldiers. Instead of learning the lesson of obeying orders, there's just an ironic parallel where Finn doesn't obey his orders. Now, this opinion is very unpopular, and I'm excited for the soon-to-be death threats. Rey is one of the most overpowered characters in Star Wars. While there are many fan theories to explain her connection with the Force, none are actually explained on screen. It leads to be a boring character. How can anyone relate to someone that is an amazing pilot, mechanic, and now Jedi without any explanations?
How did you do that? I don't know.
In this movie, there are interesting story arcs with her, but they don't ultimately go anywhere. While Luke had spent a trilogy learning the ways of the Force, going from farmer to Jedi Master, Rey has already piloted the Millennium Falcon and defeated Kylo Ren twice, which again is never explained. The only conflict she has is with her parentage, which in this film is resolved with little reward. Her role with Luke in this film is basically comparable to Moana's with Maui.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
The worst character direction goes to Luke Skywalker. Even Mark Hamill himself has stated,
"When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character."
In this film, Luke has decided after his failure that the Jedi are no longer necessary in the galaxy. He has cut himself off from the Force and everything in the galaxy with it. I agree with Mark Hamill. It disregards everything we've learned to love about Luke. Compare this to Han Solo from The Force Awakens, and there's a huge difference.
That's not how the Force works.
Han Solo looks and feels the exact same way we all remember. This is due largely to Harrison Ford's performance, which is the best part of that movie. Later in the film, Luke Skywalker decides to help, kinda, but ultimately it feels like he could have done more. In the original trilogy, Ben Kenobi becomes one with the Force because he is outmatched, and it's the only way to save Luke. Well, in this movie, Luke fades for no apparent reason. There's no explanation why Luke cannot kick Kylo Ren or Snoke's ass. He says Kylo Ren is more powerful, but that's not visually apparent or explained further. Overall, his motivations would be the one reason I support this film being non-canon. That being said, Mark did the best job possible. As for Finn and Rose, there's no real progression or arc, but a possible beginning to a love triangle. Ironically, they are my favorite characters. And that's probably the most unpopular opinion I have, is that I love their escapades in this film. Even though it has nothing to do with the plot. I just really enjoyed it. Kylo Ren is a little crybaby, who kills all the Jedi pupils for no good reason. I understand his frustration with Luke, but what did the other Jedi do to him? I simply can't justify his motivations in this film. He is a less impressive Vader ripoff. Having him simply say, kill the past, doesn't stop his parallel to the previous villains. It's just trying to be self-aware. It's just a boring character, and I don't care, and I'm not threatened. He loses all the time. J.J. Abrams kicked off a new Star Wars franchise with a cookie-cutter film that creates more questions than answers. This sequel disregards everything its predecessor set up. Maz Kanata makes a brief cameo for the unpopular subplot of this film. However, she has yet to tell us how she got the lightsaber that used to belong to Luke. Why don't they address that?
Good question.
Star Wars The Force Awakens opened with the story revolving around a map to find Luke Skywalker, a Easter egg hunt through the galaxy to find the legendary Jedi. When we find him in this film, it's a big letdown. Rian Johnson had Luke toss the lightsaber as if it had no value to him, which, don't get me wrong, it's funny as hell. It's basically a 3-year fuck you to the audience. That being said, it does leave a more desired answer. Luke states that he came to the most isolated planet in the galaxy to die and not be found. That's great and all, but why did you leave a map with your R2 unit? Feels like you kinda want to be found. Snoke has been set up as the new evil force, comparable to the Emperor in the original trilogy. He's an alien force wielder who has lived since the prequel trilogy. At least that's what's been inferred. So the internet made 1,000,001 fan theories, including him being a past slaughtered youngling, Darth Plagueis, and Mace Windu. While these are fun, they're no doubt ridiculous, and the director holds no punches in letting the audience know that he thinks they're ridiculous and doesn't give a shit about their fan theories. But what's more upsetting is that he doesn't replace it with anything better. He just kills Snoke off without answering any questions, creating a flat character that had no purpose but to add to Kylo Ren's already predictable arc. Upon reading online, I have found the answer, but it's never explained in the movie. Snoke trained Kylo Ren to be the leader of the Knights of Ren, knights that originally trained under Luke Skywalker and then followed Ren to the dark side. The average filmgoer, assuming they saw the last one, might infer that the Red Guard that was protecting Snoke were the Knights of Ren. However, upon reading an interview, they are actually called the Praetorian Guard. This seems like an oversight, and I left the theater wondering if they killed Snoke, the Knights of Ren, and Phasma, is Kylo all that's left? At least her character arc was good though. The writing. The film overall doesn't work. With cringy dialogue and inconsistent sequences, this film is just painful to watch. For a film trying new things, it sure was predictable. Not only did I see these events happening from a mile away, but even the protagonist Rey stated that certain events would happen. Even with the new direction, there is still a lot of parallels to the original trilogy. Snoke's scene was very similar to the last scene in Return of the Jedi. The island with all the Dark Force areas was very reminiscent to Dagobah. DJ is a way less cool Lando. BB-8 coming out of the AT-ST is like Chewbacca in Return of the Jedi. And there's still even more than that. This film is full of plot holes, like Poe being able to drift in space, who's stronger with the Force at what time, and then BB-8 entering a vehicle that requires hands and feet. But one scene in particular bugs the hell out of me. Finn and Rose are about to be executed by Phasma, who's standing about 3 feet away from them. The ship they are in then suffers a huge hit. Phasma then all of a sudden appears at the other end of the hangar when she was 3 feet next to them before. How did she do this? Not to mention that hundreds of stormtroopers were in that same hangar, were all of a sudden all dead, but somehow Rose and Finn are unscathed. Then, the real bullshit comes, BB-8 pilots a manned AT-ST and blows up the surviving stormtroopers. How did he do that if he doesn't have hands and feet?
You need hands.
Their escape even makes less sense. An Imperial shuttle apparently was the only vehicle to survive in that hangar, aside from BB-8's AT-ST. And apparently, not one stormtrooper got the bright idea to use it for an escape. But instead, Rose, Finn, and BB-8 all ride the AT-ST to safety. Someone got paid to write this. Being a new franchise, it's easy for people to be critical. However, it's also important to voice criticism. I am a huge Star Wars fan and wanted to enjoy this movie. Saying that fanboys are unpleasable is partly true. However, maybe it's time for this franchise to move in new directions. Rogue One was an awesome film that homaged the original trilogy without tampering its legacy. I am also dying to hear more about these Kenobi films. I do appreciate the new director's ideas, but they ultimately were more controversial than they were enjoyable. None of the characters became more developed than they had in the previous film. And you can tell this because he's retconning everything he did in this movie online. I mean, it's ridiculous. While I think the ideas were there wasn't much holding this film together, and that's very evident from the fans' mixed response. Thank you for watching, and please continue the discussion in the comments below.